Hello Moneypenny fans. You remember last time when we were sitting there procrastinating about not actually doing any work and then our friend showed up and we just had a nice barbecue? Well, this time we're planning on actually punching some holes in the boat. Stay tuned to see how we get on. What could possibly go wrong?
So I've measured back from those holes there. It's about 2 inches to the bulkhead from those last holes. So that should give us a good indication of where to position the blocks.
Right, so when I took this block out, I just gooked up the holes just to stop any water getting in there. That's kind of a temporary fix, but we'll do something a bit better. But from the back of those holes, it was going to be 2 inches back to the bulkhead. And I think if I put the block there, leaving me an inch clear, I should be okay, and I think that's close enough to the mast that everything will work out. And I think I've procrastinated enough, so the only thing to do now is to start drilling some holes. So one of the really nice things to see is that the wood core that's coming out of the deck is completely dry. So that's good.
Okay, so the new holes that I put in, that's hole 1, that's hole 2, and that's hole 3. So we're going to have to remove some material in here to put the backing plate in. But in general, that's okay. We're away from the bulkhead. It's in a good position on the mast. I think I'm pretty happy with that. So now we will do the other side and then start to figure out where we're going to put the deck organisers.
It's extraordinarily stressful drilling holes in your boat. I will be going on the 1 beer per hole policy. Okay, so next thing I want to figure out is the positioning of the deck organisers. I've got these 4-shift deck organisers, and I think what I'm going to do is keep them basically in the same place, quite far outboard. I'm going to use this outboard hole as my first hole, so this guy is going to go here, and then I'm going to measure this off and repeat that on the other side of the coach roof. Now the reason I'm coming so far outboard is because if we go and look at the Traveller, you can see that my companionway hatch, it's 1 beer too many, the companionway hatch is not centered. So I need to make sure that my lines come far enough outboard to be able to go back through that itty bitty little gap over there. And I've measured it off, it should be okay, but let's see.
So in order to get the old deck organiser off, I have to pull off these.
Once again, the wood that is coming out is bone dry, which is really, really great news. Okay, so now I've created a tape outline of where this sits, and this is going to help me to measure out where I'm going to put the second organiser on the other side of the coach roof so that everything looks
nice and parallel. Okay, so there are no straight lines in boats, so how do you transfer measurements from one side to another? Well, first things first, I took this piece of tape and I lined it up with the edge of the handrail, and then I ran that all the way across the coach roof to the other side of the edge of the handrail. So as you can see, that gives me at least one reference point here, and you know, all things being equal, we're going to assume that the two handrails, that one and that one, are at equal points on the coach roof. Then what I did was I ran one piece of tape right here to the corner, the outboard corner of the deck organizer, and I ran that up to the area in between the non-skid. Again, we're assuming that that non-skid is parallel perpendicular. That's what we want to go with. We measured it off this line that we put in, and it does measure parallel, so that's good. And then we repeated that process here, where we ran that piece of tape up to the edge of the non-skid. And that what that gives us is these two we check to be parallel, and what that does is give us places that we can measure off on the other side of the coach roof, and we can run points parallel and perpendicular down to this tape, which will give us our two outboard points. Then we can measure from the back side of this tape to here to see how far down it's got to come, and from the top side to here to see how far up it's got to come, and that will give us our angle, and then those two should be an exact mirror image. The important thing is making sure that these piece of tape and this piece of tape are at 90 degrees. And if you don't have a square or a way to measure the 90 degrees, you can cut a small section of tape that is the same width as the tape. So you cut just a little square, you stick it on, and that gives you your 90-degree corner that you then follow out, and then just measure it off for perpendicular. And now let's transfer some measurements. Little safety measure with this first piece of tape that we put on, we can also go ahead and measure the outboard edge, which is over there somewhere, and measure the distance between the edge of the non-skid and the tape to make sure that it's exactly perpendicular with the other side. We can also then run a tape across the coach house roof and make sure that they're parallel. So after some careful measuring, we've now got our two parallel stripes. That gives us the outside edges of the deck organizer. Now all we've got to do is figure out exactly where on these pieces of tape the edges need to come. If we look over there on the inboard edge, the inboard corner comes down 3/4 of an inch, so we've marked there 3/4 of an inch. And if we look over there again, the outboard corner goes up 3 3/4 inches. So we've marked there 3 3/4 inches, and then theoretically that should be our two outside corners, and the deck organizer should sit in there and should exactly mirror what's on the other side. So we're going to tape it off, eyeball it, and check it. Alright, there is a great test to see if we've got this right. This is my measured corner point over here, and the other corner point that I measured was here. Now, because we are working with diagonals, if any of this is off, the corners of the component will not line up with that. So this is how we can test how good our measurements are. We put our corner on our mark right there. Let's just line it up. And then we put our other corner on our mark just down there. Where's the pen mark? It's underneath that tape. Hold on, I'm going to prove this. There it is. On our mark down there, and we can see corner mark up there lines up pretty well. Corner mark down here, I'm off by a 1/16 of an inch, which in this situation is more than acceptable. So I'm pretty pleased with that. So our measurements look pretty good, and it looks like we are mirrored and we won't look too cattywampus. The thing to double check now is that we can run lines from the deck organizer here run it all the way down aft. So we're just going to run some tape and make sure that that's looking okay, and if we have to squish this one out a little bit, we can do that.
Absolutely bone dry. Now, on the coach roof, I'm pretty comfortable that I know where I want the clutches on this side, because the original clutches are still here. So they're going to be in this general area somewhere. We just got to get rid of these guys and figure out the exact spacing for the new ones just by running a couple of lines down the deck.
So we're going to be using Lumar replacement clutches. They come in a nice little box like that, I quite like it. Take the clutch out of the box, and they come with some labels, which is very nice. But the really nice bit is the bottom of the box converts into a drilling template. So we're going to cut this off and obviously label which way is forward and which way is back, and then we can use this to position on the decks and drill our holes. Now we want to just note that according to the box, this is where the holes are. So this is the forward end of the template, which is good because all the writing, that means, will be the right way up when we look at it.
Drilling template. Sighted it from the winch through the clutches to the new deck organizer, and I think that will do nicely. And because we're going to put 4 clutches on here, we will just put the single one right next door to it, and what we'll also do is just check that we have room for that clutch to sit there. So that guy's going to go there like that. That guy's going to go there like that. We want to make sure that we get it as in line as possible. We don't want kinks with the lines coming through here. We don't want any friction or anything like that. So we're using 2 of the old holes, which is incredibly convenient, and then we made a few new ones, and we're just going to have to patch up that and colour match it with some non-skid. So the starboard side of the coach roof was pretty easy because we could just use the position of the old clutch. With the port side, we taped the deck organizer in place and then ran a line down the deck from the deck organizer down to where we want the clutches to be to give us a straight line, and I think that is going to work out just fine. And then there's also going to be place there for the winch, so I think we're going to go ahead and mount these clutches there. Might straighten them up a little bit, they look a bit cattywampus. Alright, let's just talk very briefly about deck construction, and I'm going to go over this pretty quickly because I'm sure a lot of you already know. This is more for the people who don't. My deck is made up of a layer of fiberglass,
and then a layer of core material, in our case wood, and another layer of fiberglass. Now some decks, this creates like a sandwich, it saves some weight, it makes it very, very light and strong, it's very, very good. Some decks, this is end core balsa wood, so this means that the grain runs in that direction there. It makes it very, very strong, very, very light. In our case, it's actually little squares of plywood. Now, if you take your sandwiched deck and you drill a hole in it, now potentially water can get in here and get into the wooden core, which is really less than ideal. You don't want that at all. You certainly don't want moisture getting into the wooden core, soaking in there, you know, eventually rotting. Especially in the Midwest where we live, we take the boat out of the water, we put it up on the hard for the winter, it freezes, it causes delamination, it causes soft decks, it causes all kinds of problems. You'll probably notice in the videos I've been making a big deal about how pleased I am that the wood that's been coming out has been dry, which is great. So we've now drilled a bunch of holes in our deck. Now what are we going to do? Well, there's a number of fixes for this. One of the more popular fixes is to take a bent nail, literally a finished nail or a 5-penny nail or whatever else, bend it, stick it in your drill, stick it in the hole, and so that your bent nail kind of comes in at an angle like this. Oh, it was not my strong point, was it? And you turn your drill on and it spins and it spins and it spins, and it removes an area of the wood in between the sandwich core around your hole. You then fill that void. We put a little bit of tape across the bottom here. You fill that void with thickened epoxy, and then you re-drill your hole, and that gives you effectively an epoxy sleeve to drill through, which protects this wood from any potential leaks through this hole due to failure of caulk or sealant or whatever else. We're not going to do this. We're going to do a slightly different method. We're going to use this here bad boy, and we are going to create something that looks kind of like this. Can you guess what it is yet? So we're basically going to make a cone-shaped hole. Oops. A cone-shaped hole where our hole is going to go. So this is our wood in here, and we're going to make this big, large cone-shaped hole. We're then going to put a piece of tape across the bottom and fill that void with the thickened epoxy, which will then give us the ability to drill our hole for our fitting through a cone of epoxy. Now both of these do the same thing. I'm a big believer in the strength of triangles, and by doing this cone method, as long as we make sure we can't see any wood anywhere, we also create a triangle or a conical shaped compression post, which when we tighten down our deck fittings will stop us from compressing the deck and crushing this plywood core. This does the same thing. They both work equally well. It's horses for courses at this point. I think, as I've mentioned a couple of times, these aren't how-to videos. These are just explaining what we're doing and why we're doing it. So we're going to make some cone-shaped holes and fill them up with epoxy. So basically I've spent the day drilling holes and filling them up again. Great. So next step, now that we've got those elongated holes, we want to fill those with thickened epoxy, very famous brand here, and some high density adhesive filler, so we can mix up a nice thickened paste. And then I bought some syringes, but they look a bit small, so what I've done here is I cut the corner of a garbage bag. It's a bit thin, I'm a bit worried about it melting, and I was going to see if I can't make a cake decorating tool
just to squeeze the epoxy out into the holes. But I don't know if this is going to be strong. Oh, hold on. What I could do. Here you go. This is a much stronger bag. This is the bag from the pumps that came with the epoxy, and this is a pretty strong bag. So I think I'm going to use this instead, because I think this is going to stand less chance of melting. So let's get mixing.
And then you make little Hershey's Kisses with the epoxy, and that fills up the hole, seals up the wood, and then we can drill through that and get a nice leak-proof fitting for our new deck hardware.
I think that will do us for one day. I'm hot, I'm tired, I'm sweaty, I'm a bit gross to be honest, and somebody could probably use his tea. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Next time we will flatten out the little epoxy Hershey Kisses and get on with actually sticking some hardware onto the deck. In the meantime, if you like the videos, as ever, please do hit that thumbs up button. It means a lot to us. I welcome all your comments on what we're doing. I read everyone, I try to get back to everybody, but I do welcome comments and feedback about what we're doing with the projects. This isn't meant to be a how-to, this is just the way that I'm doing it and what I'm doing. So do please leave me a comment if you see something that you think we could do differently. That would be wonderful, and we'll see you next time when we actually get around to mounting some hardware. Thanks again, guys. Ta-da.